Good morning and welcome to the August 27th meeting of the Transient Guest Tax Committee. I am Michelle Hofer. I am the chair of the committee, and also here today is Spencer Duncan. And I guess we are ready to start. So anything you would like to say on the minutes?
No, they look good to me. There we go. They look good to me. I would move to approve.
And I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So 2-0 for minutes. Next is item 3A. And Braxton, are you going to take this?
I'll take the lead, and then Amanda and Nick can chime in where necessary.
Okay.
Obviously, the TGT has approved the LOI with the Endeavor Group, and one of the provisions in that LOI was for the city to repay itself for Hotel Topeka expenses from a combination of CID and transient guest tax. We have prepared a couple of options for you. So as the starting point, just want everyone to recognize that the current TGT is 7%. And in January 1st of 2028, under the current charter ordinance, that will drop down to 6%. And then when we get into January 1st of 2033, it will drop down to 5%. So the option one that is in front of you would allow for, and it's also, we have the fiscal note, and I'll talk about that in a second. This would allow for, after the first 1% sunsets in 2028, the city would capture that 1% transient guest tax and use that to help recoup the costs that have been expended on Hotel Topeka. Effective January 1st, 2033, when the second 1% or 1 cent TGT drops off, the city would also pick up that additional 1 cent and use it to reimburse itself for the expenses to date. Once the expenses have been fully recouped, then the 2% would drop off and the TGT would be at the 5% level. So the fiscal note, which was provided this morning, basically lays out the amount that would come to the city above the base year of 2025 from the TGT collected at Hotel Topeka, as well as the capture of the citywide TGT starting in at 1% in 2028 and then kicking up to 2% in 2033. I also had Josh update this morning the expenses to date for Hotel Topeka to capture the bonds and the interest from the recent bond issuance that we did, as well as we have had one additional operating funds request that came in to get them through October. So the total operating and capital expenses to date are $3.6 million, and then the bonds are right at $8.7 million, plus the interest over 20 years would be $5.3 million. So that comes to a total of $17.7 million. Under the option one would be shortly after 2024 that the city would recoup what the current amount is, the $17.7 million. So basically it would be in early 2045 that the city would recoup the $17.7 million total expended to date. So we'll stop there.
Madam Chair, can I give a couple extra context pieces, I think?
Sure.
Sometimes I think just for the public's awareness, our charter can be a little confusing when you look at it because it doesn't spell out where we have contractual obligations. So I just thought it would be helpful to remind everybody that we do have a 7% tax, but there are certain percentage of that previous governed bodies have contractually obligated to various organizations. And that's where, while it's not in the charter, if you follow back the history, it's why we have certain parts that fall off at certain dates. So 1% of our current TGT is contractually obligated to pay our bond payments for Sunflower soccer infrastructure. So that's why each of these were drafted in ways that protect those specific things. So the 1% has to go to bond payments until 2033. And then another 1% is divided amongst 4 organizations: Jayhawk Theater, Constitutional Hall, Evergy Plaza, and the Downtown Ice Rink. Those are contractually obligated until December 31st, 2027. Of that remaining 5%, we don't often talk about it, but of that, 79% is contractually obligated to Visit Topeka until the end of this year. That's why that contract is also in your packet. 11% is contractually obligated to the Topeka Business Improvement District, and then 5% of what's left goes to the general fund. So I just think it's important to remember that we have various buckets already that things have to go into. So as you look at changing those, anything we do, we try to make sure to not mess up bond payments or not mess up previous obligations. So that was why the initial draft, Broxton, or Deputy City Manager Copley asked us to figure out how do you protect those buckets and not take those out.
Okay.
And Amanda included a memo in the packet that goes ahead and lays out very
Right.
clearly where the 7% is going to.
And that was option 1. There's also an option 2 in your packet that also protects those that I'll let Deputy Director Copley talk
Yep.
about.
Any questions on option 1 before we jump over to option 2?
Not yet. Spencer, do you have any?
No, we're
Okay.
good. Keep going. We're good.
Okay. So, option 2 would have the current 1% sunset in 2028. That would take it down to 6%. 2033, that would take it down to 5%. But then it would impose on Hotel Topeka an 8% TGT. And then starting, again, based on the increment above the base year, which would be 2025. And so the financial note has on option 2 that if we go that route, even at 2057, we will have only collected 14.8 million. So we didn't have a chance to run that out to the 17 million, but we're talking substantially into probably close to the end of 2060 to be able to recoup the full 17.7 million by going with just this solely collecting the 8% TGT at Hotel Topeka.
So option 2 takes a very different approach. It says, let's just stay focused on Hotel Topeka and what it brings in helps reimburse what it does. So what it does is Deputy City Manager, sorry, I really struggle over that phrasing. Deputy CM Braxton Copley said, is it takes, everyone else has your current TGT. But Hotel Topeka itself will be a higher rate than the rest of the city, and it will stay at that higher rate until the costs have been repaid of the 8%. And then using what we have raised for this year, it carves out that base year, protects the 1% for Sunflower Soccer, protects the 1% for the organizations like the theater and Constitutional Hall. But it leaves it at that higher rate. And yes, it might take longer, but the approach being you have 2 different policy options about do you want to stick with what is raised at Hotel Topeka goes back to refund that, even if it potentially takes longer. And this is one way to do that by having a higher rate. We think there's a rational basis for that can be supported. So just 2 very different approaches for the policymakers to talk about and consider.
Okay, one thing I'm not noticing, and I did not see it mentioned, the $1 million down payment for the hotel. Is that taken off of the amount that we have to recoup?
No, we're just going with the total amount to date, so it'd be 16 point. So if we were to do this today, if we were to close the transaction today and convey it to the Endeavor, the total amount we would have expended, including interest and the bonds, is 17.7. So take 1 million off of that, and it would be 16.7.
Less a little interest and, okay. Okay, there's a policy question. If we decide to drop the 1% that we have been supporting groups at any point. And same for Sunflower, that's a policy decision too.
No, that's a,
Well, it's contractual, but I'm saying when it expires.
yeah, but that's not till 2032.
Yeah, that's a ways out, so,
I mean, look, the reality is between these two proposals, the only difference for the first 2 years is that 1% increase. The first proposal really doesn't do anything differently for those first 2 years. All it really does is anticipate what would begin happening in 28 and 33 and try to offset those changes. I would argue a lot's going to happen in 2 years. I think we're going to have some other conversations. We've seen some other cities make changes to their overall transient guest tax rate recently around us. And now that they've made those changes, I think we have a very positive future discussion about making some similar adjustments. I think now we're aware. This conversation is the first time I was aware that our TGT rate even sunsetted as I saw these proposals. I have no idea why they did that. Well, who knows, right? But I think now that some of us know that, we could reverse that policy, have a discussion about that. Even if we don't want to increase it, why is it going to sunset anyway? My other concern is that I think in conceptually, option 2 is kind of what the governing body has already approved to this point. When we looked at the contract, that was kind of a basic understanding by the rest of the governing body, and I'm concerned if we bring option 1, that's going to just create unnecessary confusion. I mean, we get it and we understand it, but I think there's going to be questions of, wait, didn't we conceptually already just agree? Which is why I think I like that we raise it to 8%, so we capture that 6%, we keep all our contracts whole, and then that gives us future flexibility over the next year or two to have conversations about the transient guest tax in general, what it should look like, especially as those other contracts expire in 2027, and then the body can start having discussions, which we've already talked about in here, need to start happening next year about what the next phase of that looks like. So I would lean towards option 2 for those reasons, not to shut the door on the concerns that option 1 raises, but to just say we don't have to make that leap yet. We have some time to make those policy decisions to come up with those offsets. That's my philosophy on it.
I have a question on the base rate was determined based on 2024,
2025.
Yeah, 2025.
but we're not finished with it. So
Correct.
could that
So-
possibly
so-
change?
Yes, ma'am. Obviously, it's a projection based on actuals for 2024 as well as through July 31st of 2025. Given the need to close the transaction and actually convey property to Endeavor and then give them an opportunity to order the materials, it's unlikely that there is going to be a material change in occupancy that would affect the base rate that we have based on the 2024 projections.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that to make sure I knew.
Why would that be? I mean, the projections that we've seen as Endeavor or other groups we've talked to believe occupancy will go up once those rooms are renovated, which is why we've made this investment in the first place, was to get that conference center. So, I mean, wouldn't there be, heck, it can't get much worse than the current occupancy, but even if that doubled, wouldn't these numbers then slightly go up if that occupancy went from the 20s even to the 40s?
So we're talking two different things. Let me just clarify. The question I was answering for Councilmember Hofer was, how did we establish the 2025 base rate, and could that 2025 base rate change? Yes, it could, possibly, but the reality is that it is extremely unlikely that we're going to close the sale and Endeavor start making improvements to the hotel that would actually increase the occupancy for 2025. The projections that you have for the
25,
TG,
okay.
the projections that you have
Gotcha.
do have a increase in occupancy as the hotel gets, and Manor get improved to be able to generate and support that. So that is already built into the
Okay,
projections.
great, thank you.
So anything over that base rate, even if it would, in actuality, go up a little bit, would still be captured by us to pay back for the hotel. So potentially, we could have a little bit higher return to pay off the hotel.
Correct. And again, these projections are based on 1 million assumptions.
True. Okay. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, we have to start somewhere. And anything that happens with the expiration of the current percentages to the different groups will be discussed next year and beyond. So, I'm personally leaning towards option number 2. No, it does not pay us back as quickly, but I have some faith in Endeavor that they're going to do better than we're projecting, that we will see more income to TGT to pay it off sooner, especially if we get Manor back on solid footing and being rented out on a regular basis. So at this point, I also believe that option 2 is what we agreed to in council and we have the votes for. I'm not sure we have votes for option A. And at this point, I want to keep moving and get the hotel sold. So would you like to do a motion or?
Sure. I'll move to approve option 2.
Okay. And I will second that. And I guess it's time to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's 2-0, and we'll move that forward to City Council. So the next item is the Visit Topeka contract.
Yes, ma'am. And this is your, the next and the last item on the agenda, and hopefully we can get through this before hypothermia sets in.
Yep.
In fairness to this committee, I did not want to wait until your next regularly scheduled meeting in November and then bring this contract up to you and say, oh, and by the way, next month, your contract with DTI or Visit Topeka expires. Do you guys, and then expect you to turn on a dime and come up with a new contract. So basically, the original contract, as Amanda had indicated in her note, has 79% of the 5% TGT goes to Visit Topeka, and then 11% of that 5% TGT goes to fund the BID for the Business Improvement District downtown. And so back in 2018 was the original contract was executed, and then in 2022 there was a 3-year contract extension to continue that relationship with Visit Topeka for a total of 90% of the TGT funds, and the remaining 10% goes into the city's general fund.
Okay.
So wanted to get this up on your radar screens now, if you have so obviously contracts can be executed by the city manager, but this is a policy decision truly for TGT committee and the governing body. Do we continue this contractual relationship and with Visit Topeka, as well as do we continue this same percentage allocation of funding?
And then even if you do want to keep it completely the same, there will need to be a carve out for option 2 to say that the 75% from Hotel Topeka goes back to refunding Hotel Topeka so that you have your 1%.
Sure.
So just that piece would be the carved out.
Okay.
Okay. So
I guess it wouldn't
This
have to be,
isn't,
but it makes
No.
sense to do that.
okay. At this point, I haven't really considered any changes because I felt like it was working, but we're just discussion this month. So Spencer, do you have any considerations on this?
No, I guess I'm trying to, you mentioned it, but has this been a 2-year contract? Then repeat that again. It was last renewed when?
It was last renewed in November of 2022, and that
Okay.
was to extend it for 3 years, 23,
3 years,
24, and 25. So it was a
Okay.
3-year contract extension.
Okay. 'Cause, yeah, there's
Okay.
various dates all throughout this thing. I'm
Yeah.
trying to wrap my head around that one.
And that's one thing that I can agree to. The 3-year contract seems to be working, so I don't have a problem with that. I think it comes down to the percentages if we want to change anything.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
don't know if Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala has seen the contract or read it very closely. I want to get her input yet. But I think it's only fair to open it up and let Visit Topeka speak. if they'd
Yeah, I
like
guess
to.
the question I would have for staff, which is Topeka can answer that today or later, is if we think there will be any substantial changes requested in the version we might see in November as to what would be signed, or if the goal is to keep it pretty much the same with an extension. So I don't expect to have an answer now. I just,
No, obviously, this is policy decision for you all. The only change is going to be the carve-out for the 8% that would go from 8% of the TGT collected at Hotel Topeka would go directly to the city and would not be subject to the allocations under this contract.
okay, awesome.
Okay. Would you like to speak?
Just a few things. This is a common misconception, but the BID, the contribution is actually our bidding fund. It's not the business improvement district. So we use that to go after large groups. So that's our allocation for that. But no, we're happy to have the discussion. We submit our quarterly reports to you. We just got our Q2 wrap up here this week. But we've worked hard for you for the last 2.5 years, marketing this city, bringing in big groups and advocating for the development we have across the city. About a dozen or so projects that we calculated last evening with the board of directors of Visit Topeka. So no, we're proud to be doing the work we're doing and would like to continue that work with you under the current agreement we've got with you.
Okay.
Can you confirm your name, please?
Sean Dixon, president of Visit Topeka. Sorry.
Oh, I just,
That's sir.
Any questions?
No?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to speak on this? I assume not. Okay. Well then, at this point, I think we are going to sit on this until the next meeting, and if anything comes up, we will discuss it and get that to everyone and decide if we want to make any changes, but right now I'm seeing it, except for the addition.
Yeah, and the legal department can make those updates as well as there's just a couple standard things that have changed in our language that we use on standard contracts, so maybe some updates are appropriate there, but they can get that ready for you for your next meeting.
Right. Would you like us to prepare a 3-year extension of this agreement, basically with the Hotel Topeka carve-out, but leaving the material terms the same for consideration at your November
That
meeting?
sounds good to me. And then if we have to make any changes in November, we
Free.
will, but it'd be good to have the closest to correct document in place.
I'm sure Nick will relish the opportunity to work on that after Amanda leaves.
Okay, well, the only other thing I have on here is public comment, and no one has signed up. Is there anyone who wanted to speak, or are we good? Okay. Then that is all is before the TGT committee, and we're done for today. Our next meeting is, I believe, November 13th. So I adjourn the meeting.